On the night before Christmas, I, Andrew Miller, stood in the dim hallway of our Austin home, the air thick with the scent of pine from the tree in the living room. My hands were steady as I carefully removed the battery from the old hallway clock, its ticking suddenly silenced. I had bought that clock years ago, a relic from my father's estate, but now it served a new purpose. I planted a hidden camera in its spot, positioning it just right to capture the living room without drawing attention. Luke had been staying with us for the holidays, claiming family time, but his late-night whispers with those construction buddies of his had tipped me off. I couldn't ignore the unease gnawing at me anymore. After all I'd done for him, co-signing loans and backing his projects, this felt like a shadow over everything. I waited through the quiet hours, the house settling into stillness. At dawn, with the first light filtering through the curtains, I pulled Sarah into the kitchen. She was brewing coffee, her routine as predictable as ever, when I slid the tablet across the counter. "Watch this," I said, my voice low. Her face drained of color as the footage played. There was Luke Harper, our son-in-law, sprawled in the armchair by the fireplace, a half-empty glass in his hand. He was bragging to two of his buddies, their faces blurred but their laughter sharp. "Andrew's signatures? Gold. They'll keep my debts afloat with the crew, no sweat," he said, chuckling like it was a joke. He mentioned my name again, tying it to his latest ventures, as if my trust was just another tool in his kit. Sarah's cup paused midway to her lips, her eyes fixed on the screen. Her hands trembled slightly on the table, knuckles whitening, but she didn't say a word at first. We sat there in the growing light, the weight of it sinking in. This betrayal cut deep, unraveling the family ties we'd built over years. Ellie deserved better than this hidden rot, and so did we. The previous afternoon had set the stage for everything that unfolded that Christmas Eve morning. It was one of those crisp Austin days where the winter sun hung low, casting long shadows over the bustling streets downtown. Luke had insisted on hosting what he called a charity brunch at this upscale venue near the Colorado River, one of those trendy spots with exposed brick walls and artisanal everything. He pitched it as a way to give back to the community, tying it to his construction firm's supposed efforts in affordable housing. Ellie, our daughter, had been thrilled at first, anything to boost his image, she said. But I knew better. Luke had been leaning on me heavily for the past year, ever since his loft project in East Austin hit snags with permits and funding. I'd co-signed that loan without a second thought, back when he was just starting out, full of big ideas about revitalizing old warehouses into modern lofts. Quietly, I'd even unlocked a few of his credit applications behind the scenes, pulling strings with bankers I'd known from my days in real estate development. It wasn't about favoritism, it was about family. Or so I thought. We arrived at the brunch around noon, the place already humming with local influencers, business types, and a smattering of actual philanthropists. Sarah and I dressed simply, me in a gray button-down and slacks, her in a modest navy dress, while Ellie fussed over Luke's tie, making sure he looked the part of the successful entrepreneur. He was sharp as ever, in a tailored suit that probably cost more than it should, his hair slicked back, exuding that easy confidence that had charmed Ellie into marrying him 5 years ago. The venue was decked out for the holidays, garlands draped over the beams, twinkling lights strung across the open ceiling, and a long communal table groaning under platters of avocado toast, smoked salmon, and those overpriced mimosas. Luke had rented the whole back room, overlooking the river, and he'd invited about 30 people, developers, contractors, even a city council member who handled zoning approvals. As we walked in, Luke greeted us with that wide grin of his, clapping me on the back a little too hard. "Andrew, Sarah, glad you made it. This is going to be huge for the cause." He steered Ellie toward the front, where the VIP seats were, right next to the head table. But when it came to me, he hesitated, his eyes flicking around the room like he was calculating angles. "Hey, why don't you grab a spot over there in the corner? Better view of the whole setup, you know?" I followed his gesture to a small table tucked against the far wall, half hidden behind a potted ficus and away from the main action. It was the kind of seat you give to someone you don't want noticed, like furniture, as it turned out. Sarah shot me a questioning look, but I just nodded and took my place, folding my napkin neatly as the event kicked off. The brunch started with small talk, waiters weaving through the crowd with trays of bubbly. Luke worked the room like a pro, shaking hands, laughing at the right moments. Ellie beamed beside him, her hand on his arm, proud as ever. I sipped my coffee, black, no frills, and watched from my vantage point. It wasn't long before Luke took the makeshift podium, a wooden crate draped in a white cloth, microphone in hand. The room quieted, all eyes on him. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, his voice smooth and amplified, "thank you for joining us today. This isn't just a brunch, it's a commitment to building a better Austin. Our firm, Harper Builds, is proud to announce a partnership with local developer Marcus Hale for the next phase of urban renewal." He went on like that, painting this picture of innovation and community spirit. Marcus Hale, a burly guy with a salt and pepper beard and a reputation for flipping properties fast, stood up to join him, raising a glass. They toasted, Luke first, clinking glasses with a flourish. To Marcus, whose vision has transformed skylines across Texas. Without partners like him, we'd still be stuck in the past. The crowd applauded, and Luke launched into details about the project: sustainable materials, green spaces, jobs for locals. It sounded good on paper, the kind of pitch that gets grants and tax breaks. But as he spoke, I shifted in my seat, feeling the weight of that corner table like an anchor. He didn't mention me once. Not a nod to the cosign I'd put on his loft loan last year, the one that had bailed him out when the banks balked at his credit history. Not a word about how I'd quietly endorsed those credit applications, vouching for him to lenders who remembered my name from bigger deals. I'd done it all without fanfare, telling Sarah it was just helping the kids get ahead. Ellie had her hands full with the grandkids, and Luke's ambition seemed harmless enough back then. Instead, Luke kept the spotlight on himself and Hale, gesturing animatedly as they swapped stories about overcoming obstacles. Hale bragged about a recent high-rise in Dallas, crediting his team's unwavering support. Luke nodded along, adding, "That's the kind of backbone we need in this industry, reliable partners who deliver." Reliable. The word stung as it echoed through the speakers. I glanced around, a few people near me murmured agreements, but no one seemed to notice my isolation. Sarah caught my eye from across the room, her brow furrowed, but she was seated with Ellie, trapped in the glow of the moment. Luke wrapped up his toast with a call for donations, passing around pledge cards that circulated faster than the food. By the time the entrees arrived, some quinoa salad I barely touched, the event had raised what he claimed was $10,000. He thanked everyone profusely, hugging Hale like an old friend, while I sat there, napkin untouched, feeling more like a prop than a father-in-law. As the brunch wound down, guests milled about, exchanging cards and compliments. Luke finally made his way over to my table, Ellie trailing behind with a plate of desserts. "How'd you like the show, Andrew?" he asked, casual as if nothing was amiss. I forced a smile, setting down my fork. It was impressive. Hale seems solid. He laughed, clapping my shoulder again. "Yeah, he's the real deal. We're cooking up something big." Ellie chimed in, excited, "Dad, wasn't it amazing? Luke's really making a difference." I nodded, but inside, the pieces were shifting. That afternoon, as we drove home in separate cars, Luke insisting on taking Ellie to pick up the kids, I replayed the scene in my mind. The way he'd maneuvered me to the sidelines, treating my support like it was invisible. It wasn't just oversight, it was deliberate. He'd built his narrative without me, using the very leverage I'd given him to shine brighter. By the time we pulled into the driveway, the unease had hardened into resolve. That night, as I tampered with the clock and set the camera, I knew the brunch wasn't charity, it was a performance, and I'd been cast as the silent extra. The drive back had been quiet for Sarah and me. She commented on the food, the decorations, anything to fill the silence, but I could tell she sensed it too, the undercurrent of something off. We arrived home before Luke and Ellie, the house empty and echoing. I busied myself in the garage, tinkering with an old toolbox, but my thoughts kept circling back to that toast. Luke had mentioned unwavering support, but whose? Not mine, apparently. I'd sunk time and credibility into his ventures, even advising him on navigating the city's building codes after a delay threatened the loft's completion. Last spring, when his crew walked off over unpaid invoices, I'd wired funds discreetly to keep things moving, framing it as an investment in family stability. Ellie never knew the details, she just saw her husband succeeding. But watching him elevate Hale, a man I'd never heard him mention before, while sidelining me, it felt like erasure. As evening fell, Luke and Ellie returned with the grandkids, all chatter and energy. The kids ran straight to the tree, shaking presents, while Luke helped unload bags from the car. He caught my eye as he passed, saying, "Great day, right? We should do more of these." I agreed vaguely, retreating to the kitchen to help Sarah with dinner prep. Over plates of roast chicken and potatoes, the conversation stayed light: holiday plans, the kids' school plays. But under the table, my foot tapped restlessly. Luke dominated the talk, recounting the brunch anecdotes, exaggerating the crowd's enthusiasm. "Marcus is key," he said, forking into his meal. "His network opens doors." Ellie nodded eagerly, but Sarah exchanged a glance with me, her expression tight. Later, as the family gathered around the fire, Luke pulled out his phone, showing videos of the event to the kids. I excused myself early, claiming fatigue, and headed to the hallway. That's when I made my move with the clock. Removing the battery was simple. The camera, a small device I'd ordered online weeks ago after suspicions first arose, fit perfectly in the hollow. It wasn't paranoia, it was prudence. Luke's late-night calls, his vague excuses about business trips, the way bills piled up despite the firm's supposed growth. The brunch had crystallized it. He saw me as a means to an end, not a partner. As I tested the feed on my phone, the living room came into view, empty and innocent. But I knew it wouldn't stay that way. By bedtime, the house quieted. Sarah joined me in our room, slipping under the covers. "What's eating at you, Andrew?" she asked softly. I hesitated, then told her about the brunch, the corner seat, the toast, the omissions. She sighed, squeezing my hand. "He's ambitious. Maybe it's just the pressure." But her voice lacked conviction. We lay there, staring at the ceiling, the weight of unspoken doubts pressing down. Outside, Austin's lights twinkled through the window, but inside, the holiday cheer felt fragile. That night, sleep came fitfully, my mind replaying Luke's words, his laughter with Hale. By dawn, when I showed her the footage, it all connected. The brunch wasn't a celebration, it was a warning sign I'd ignored too long. At first light on Christmas morning, I slipped out of the house before the rest of the family stirred. The footage from the hidden camera still burned in my mind, Luke's casual boasts about using my name to prop up his sinking ventures. Sarah had nodded grimly when I showed her, her silence speaking volumes. We agreed I needed to act fast, before the holiday masked the truth any longer. I grabbed my keys and a thermos of black coffee. Leaving a note on the kitchen counter, meeting a contact in Houston. Back by noon. Love, Andrew. The drive south on I-35 was quiet, the early morning traffic light, with only a few semis rumbling along and the occasional family van heading to visit relatives. Austin's skyline faded in the rearview, giving way to rolling hills dotted with live oaks, their branches bare against the pale sky. It was just past 6 a.m., and the sun was a thin line on the horizon, turning the road ahead into a ribbon of gold. My hands gripped the wheel tightly, not from the chill but from the resolve building inside me. I'd built my career on calculated moves in real estate, spotting risks before they swallowed deals whole. Luke's games ended today. Houston loomed larger as the miles ticked by, the sprawl of refineries and high-rises emerging like a concrete forest. I arrived at Matthew Carter's office downtown a little before 8, the building a sleek tower of glass and steel that reflected the awakening city. Matthew was an old associate from my development days, sharp, discreet, the kind of attorney who handled family matters without the drama. We'd crossed paths years ago on a joint venture in the Woodlands, and when things got messy with a partner, he was the one who cleaned it up quietly. I texted him from the lobby, "Here early. Coffee?" He buzzed me up immediately, his receptionist waving me through with a holiday greeting I barely acknowledged. Matthew's office was on the 12th floor, overlooking the bayou, with floor-to-ceiling windows that let in the morning light. He was already at his desk, sleeves rolled up, a stack of files beside his steaming mug. "Andrew," he said, standing to shake my hand, his grip firm. "Merry Christmas, though it doesn't sound like yours is off to a festive start. Sit. Tell me everything." I laid it out methodically, starting with the brunch the day before, Luke's sidelining of me, the toast to Hale that erased my contributions. Then the camera footage, Luke's voice, clear as day, leveraging my signatures to keep his creditors at bay. Matthew listened without interrupting, jotting notes on a legal pad, his expression neutral but his eyes narrowing at the key details. "Co-signing the loft loan, unlocking those credit lines, that's exposure," he said when I finished. "And if he's bragging about it like that, it's not just poor judgment, it's a liability. We can revoke guarantees today." I nodded, pulling a folder from my briefcase with copies of the documents, the loan agreements, my endorsements, even emails where I'd vouched for Luke's projects. Matthew reviewed them quickly, his pen circling clauses. "This is straightforward. Full revocations on all your personal guarantees. We'll file electronically, holidays or not, the system's up." He pulled up his computer, drafting the notices with efficient keystrokes. I watched the screen, the words forming, termination of obligations, effective immediately. By 8:30, we were deep into it. First, the revocations. Matthew prepared letters to the primary lenders on the loft loan, a mid-sized bank in Austin, and the credit lines I'd helped secure through a Houston-based firm. "This severs your liability," he explained, signing as my counsel. "They can't come after you for his defaults." I signed where indicated, my signature steady despite the knot in my stomach. It wasn't anger driving me, it was protection, for Sarah, for Ellie and the grandkids, for the family holdings I'd built over decades. Next came the internal audit of Luke's dealings with the family fund. I'd set up that fund years ago, a trust for the kids' futures, with provisions for business investments. Luke had dipped into it for his construction startup, with my approval, but the camera footage suggested misuse. Matthew contacted the fund's administrator via secure email, triggering a full review, transaction logs, expenditure reports, anything tied to Harper builds. "This will flag irregularities," he said. "If he's siphoned more than authorized, it'll show." I provided access codes from my phone, watching as the request pinged through the system. It felt like pulling a thread, knowing the whole sweater might unravel. We moved to the conference room for the calls, a sterile space with a long oak table and a speakerphone that hummed to life. Matthew handled the notifications to the primary lenders, his voice professional and unyielding. First was the bank on the loft. "This is Matthew Carter, representing Andrew Miller. We're formally notifying you of the termination of Mr. Miller's guarantees on the Harper loan, effective today." The loan officer on the other end paused, then confirmed receipt. "We'll need to reassess the collateral," she said, her tone shifting to caution. Matthew followed up with the credit firm, "All endorsements from Mr. Miller are revoked. No further obligations on his part for Harper's applications." Again, acknowledgement, followed by a note to update their files. I sat back, the weight lifting slightly with each step. These weren't rash moves, they were surgical, cutting ties without fanfare. Matthew glanced at me midway through. "You sure about this, Andrew? Family's involved." I met his gaze. "Ellie's my daughter, but Luke's actions put us all at risk. Better now than after a collapse." The audit request wrapped up by 9, with the administrator promising a preliminary report within 24 hours. Matthew printed everything: revocations, notifications, audit triggers, and we reviewed them line by line. "This protects the family fund," he said, stamping the final copy. "If Luke's overextended, it'll come to light." I thought of the brunch again, Luke's easy laugh as he toasted Hale, oblivious to the strings I'd pulled for him. Last year, when the loft's foundation cracked under poor soil testing, I'd connected him with engineers from my network, covering the consult fees out of pocket. Quietly, I'd even deferred some of my own project timelines to free up capital for his crew. But gratitude? Absent. Instead, he'd treated me like an afterthought, a signature on demand. As we wrapped the paperwork, Matthew's assistant brought in fresh coffee, breaking the tension. "Holiday rush," she said with a smile. I managed a nod, but my mind was already racing ahead, to the fallout Luke would face. By 10, we were done. I shook Matthew's hand again, the folder tucked under my arm. "Send me the confirmations as they come in," I said. He assured me he would, walking me to the elevator. "Take care, Andrew. This might get messy, but you've done the right thing." The descent felt symbolic, the city rising around me as I stepped out into the crisp air. Houston buzzed with pre-holiday energy, shoppers on the sidewalks, horns blaring from the streets, but I felt detached, focused. The drive back north was smoother, traffic picking up with families on the move. I called Sarah around 10:30, her voice soft over the speaker. "Everything set?" she asked. "Yes. Revocations filed, audit triggered, lenders notified." She paused. "Luke's still asleep. Ellie's with the kids by the tree." I could hear the faint chatter in the background, the innocence of the morning. "I'll be home soon," I replied. As the miles passed, I reflected on the family fund's origins. I'd started it after Ellie's birth, pouring in profits from my first big development, a suburban subdivision that put us on solid ground. Luke's entry had been gradual, promises of returns that never quite materialized. The audit would clarify that. Pulling into Austin just before noon, the holiday decorations along the highway seemed brighter, but the resolve in my chest remained. I'd severed the ties, but the real test lay ahead: how Luke would respond when the calls started coming. Matthew texted as I neared home: "Bank acknowledged revocation. Reassessment underway." It was the first domino, and I knew more would follow. Parking in the driveway, I sat for a moment, the house aglow with lights. This Christmas, accountability would be the gift no one expected. By midday on that Christmas day, the revocations I'd signed off on in Houston began rippling through Luke's world like cracks in a foundation. I arrived back home just as the family was settling into the living room, the scent of turkey and cinnamon wafting from the kitchen where Sarah was putting the finishing touches on lunch. Ellie was on the floor with the grandkids, helping them arrange presents under the tree, their laughter a stark contrast to the storm I'd set in motion. Luke lounged on the couch, scrolling his phone, oblivious for the moment. I caught Sarah's eye as I hung up my coat. She gave a subtle nod, her expression a mix of relief and worry. "Good timing," she whispered, handing me a plate. We ate in relative peace, ham slices, mashed potatoes, the kids chattering about Santa, but my phone buzzed intermittently in my pocket, notifications from Matthew confirming the filings. I didn't check them at the table, that could wait until after. It started with the mortgage on their East Austin home, the one tied to the loft project I'd co-signed. Around 12:30, as we cleared the dishes, Luke's phone rang for the first time. He stepped into the hallway, his voice low but carrying. "What do you mean flagged? It's Christmas, can't this wait?" I pretended to help with the cleanup, ears tuned. The lender was a regional bank, the same one I'd dealt with in Houston that morning. Matthew's revocation had hit their system fast, now the loan was marked heightened risk. Without my guarantee, Luke's personal credit, spotted with late payments from his firm's cash flow issues, couldn't carry the weight alone. He paced back into view, face flushed, ending the call with a curt, "I'll get back to you." Ellie noticed, setting down a toy. "Everything okay?" He forced a smile, ruffling the oldest grandkid's hair. "Just work stuff. Nothing big." But I saw the tension in his shoulders, the way he gripped the phone like a lifeline. The calls didn't stop there. By 1 o'clock, as the kids tore into a few early gifts, wrapping paper flying everywhere, another ring pulled him aside. This time, it was the insurer on the property. The loft, still under construction with half the units leased, required coverage that hinged on stable financing. My revocation triggered a policy review. The insurer demanded a full reevaluation of the risk profile. Luke's voice rose slightly from the kitchen. "Reassess? We just renewed last quarter. This is ridiculous." The agent on the line was polite but firm, citing the updated lender status. Premiums would spike, or worse, coverage could lapse if collateral wasn't shored up. He hung up, muttering under his breath, and rejoined us with a plate of pie he didn't touch. Sarah and I exchanged glances over the coffee. She mouthed, "Matthew?" I nodded faintly. The dominoes were tipping, each one exposing the fragility of the house Luke had built on borrowed trust. The SUV dealer call came next, around 1:45, as the afternoon light slanted through the windows. Luke had financed a gleaming black Escalade last month, a business necessity for site visits, though I'd seen him use it more for schmoozing clients like Hale. The loan was through a dealership affiliate, cross-referenced with his construction credit lines, ones I'd quietly endorsed. Now, with those revoked, the dealer was threatening to unwind the entire contract. Fresh collateral? In 48 hours? Luke's tone sharpened, echoing down the hall. He was in the study now, door ajar, phone pressed to his ear. "I put down a deposit, can't you work with me?" The rep explained the policy. Without the backing guarantees, the deal was high risk, and they'd repossess unless he posted new assets, like liquid funds or unencumbered property. Every word from the other end grew sharper, less patient, laced with legal disclaimers about holiday extensions being minimal. Luke slammed the phone down, not hard, but enough to make the kids glance up from their games. He emerged, face pale, forcing cheer. "Battery died," he lied, plugging it in. But the grandkids, sensing the shift, clung closer to Ellie, who looked between us with growing concern. I stepped outside for air around 2, the backyard quiet under a thin layer of frost. Austin's suburbs felt hushed on Christmas, neighbors' lights twinkling in the distance. My phone showed texts from Matthew, mortgage flagged confirmed. Insurer notified, re-eval in process. Dealer alert sent. Each update was a step toward containment, protecting what I'd built for the family. Luke's overreach had started small, delays on the loft due to shoddy subcontractors. Then escalating to side deals that drained the budget. I'd covered gaps last summer, wiring funds to keep suppliers paid, all while advising him on better bidding practices from my experience. But gratitude turned to entitlement. He'd started name-dropping me in meetings without permission, leveraging my reputation like a credit card. Now, with the revocations live, the calls were the market's response, lenders pulling back, partners reassessing. It wasn't revenge, it was reality catching up. Back inside, the tension thickened. Luke's phone buzzed again, a voicemail this time. He played it on speaker by mistake, the room half hearing the lender's follow-up, "Mr. Harper, regarding the heightened risk flag, please provide documentation by end of business tomorrow, or we'll initiate proceedings." Ellie froze mid-sentence, her eyes on Luke. "What's going on?" He waved it off. "Loan mix-up. I'll handle it." But the kids picked up on it, the youngest asking why Daddy sounded mad. Sarah distracted them with hot chocolate, herding them to the playroom, while Ellie pulled Luke aside. Their voices murmured low, her pleading tone, his reassurances laced with frustration. I busied myself with the fire, adding logs, but overheard snippets. "Andrew's name was on it, maybe he can call?" Luke's suggestion hung in the air, a last grasp at the leverage he'd boasted about the night before. By 3, the pattern was clear. Another call from a subcontractor, not directly tied to me but spooked by the whispers in the industry network. Payments froze as word spread. Luke's firm was suddenly radioactive. He answered in the hallway again, voice strained. "Yes, I know about the flag. We're sorting it." The SUV dealer's follow-up email pinged audibly. He checked it, jaw tightening. 48 hours to post collateral meant liquidating something fast, perhaps equipment from the loft site, or dipping into personal savings that barely existed. Every interaction grew sharper, the insurer's rep emailing for immediate docs, the bank's automated alert about potential default triggers. Luke paced more now, checking his watch, the holiday facade cracking. Ellie emerged from their talk, eyes red-rimmed, and sat beside me on the couch. "Dad," Luke stressed about work. "The mortgage, something changed today." I met her gaze steadily. "Changes happen, Ellie. Sometimes they're necessary." She searched my face, piecing it together, but didn't press. As the afternoon wore on, Sarah and I kept the routine going, board games with the kids, carols on low volume, to shield them from the undercurrent. But Luke's phone became a constant companion, each ring a reminder of the unraveling. The mortgage flag meant higher rates if refinanced, or foreclosure whispers if ignored. The insurer's reevaluation could void policies, exposing the loft to liabilities from ongoing builds. And the SUV? Losing it would hit his image hard, the flashy ride part of his pitch to clients. I reflected on the family fund audit Matthew had triggered. Preliminary pings already showed discrepancies, funds allocated to equipment leases that matched Luke's verbal boasts. It all connected, the brunch performance, the corner seat, the camera's truth. I'd enabled him out of love for Ellie, co-signing when banks saw red flags in his projections, unlocking credit when his own score tanked from overexpansion. But enabling stopped at betrayal. By 4, as dusk settled early, Luke excused himself to make calls in the guest room. The house felt heavier, the tree lights casting long shadows. Ellie joined Sarah in the kitchen, their conversation hushed. I stepped onto the porch, dialing Matthew for an update. "Dominoes falling as expected," he said. "Lenders are moving quick, holiday or not." I thanked him, pocketing the phone. Inside, the grandkids played on, innocent to the shifts. This was the cost of accountability: sharp calls, impatient voices, 48-hour deadlines. Luke would face it head-on, or learn the hard way. As I re-entered, catching his silhouette on the phone again, I knew the real holiday test was just beginning. The hidden camera I'd planted the night before delivered a hard twist that evening, turning what was left of our Christmas into a revelation no one could ignore. By dusk, the house had settled into an uneasy rhythm after the afternoon's barrage of calls. The grandkids, tuckered out from presents and pie, had been put to bed early by Ellie, who moved through the motions with a forced smile. Luke had retreated to the guest room multiple times, his phone glued to his ear, voice dropping to urgent whispers whenever he emerged. Sarah and I cleared the last of the dishes in the kitchen, the clink of plates a small anchor in the tension. "He's unraveling," she said quietly, drying a glass. I nodded, glancing at the hallway clock, its face blank, battery still out, but the camera feed live on my phone in silent vigil. "Let it play out," I replied. We both knew the revocations were working their way through the system, but the real proof of Luke's depths lay in what the night might capture. Around 8, the family gathered loosely in the living room. Ellie suggested a movie to unwind, something light with the kids' favorites, but Luke begged off, claiming a headache. "Work emails piling up," he said, rubbing his temples. Ellie frowned but let him go, curling up on the couch with the little ones. I sat in my armchair, remote in hand, but my mind was elsewhere, monitoring the camera app discreetly. The feed showed the hallway empty, the living room door ajar, soft glow from the TV spilling out. Sarah joined me, her hand on my arm during the film's opening scenes. It was a holiday classic, voices cheerful on screen, but the undercurrent in our home felt anything but. Halfway through, Luke slipped out of the guest room, grabbing a glass of water from the kitchen. He paused in the hallway, eyes flicking toward my office door at the end of the corridor. I tensed, but he moved on, rejoining briefly before excusing himself again. "Need to check something," he muttered. Ellie waved him off, distracted by the plot. The movie ended around 10, the credits rolling as we said goodnights. The kids were already asleep upstairs, Ellie tucking them in with stories of reindeer. Luke lingered in the living room, pacing slowly, his phone dark for once. Sarah and I headed to our room, but I couldn't shake the unease. "Check the feed later," I whispered to her. She nodded, changing into her nightgown. Sleep came in fits for me, the clock on the nightstand ticking past 11. Around midnight, a soft creak pulled me awake, the house settling or something more. I checked my phone under the covers, the camera app showed movement. Heart steady, I slipped out of bed, pulling on a robe. Sarah stirred. "Andrew?" "Just checking on things," I said, kissing her forehead. I padded silently to the hallway, phone in hand, but stayed out of sight, letting the camera do its work. The footage captured it all in crisp black and white. At 2 a.m., the living room door eased open, and there was Luke, disheveled in sweatpants and a tee, his face shadowed but intent. He glanced around, the house still, then crept down the hall toward my office. The camera's angle caught him perfectly, hesitant steps, hand testing the doorknob. It was locked, as always. I kept important files there, including access to the family fund portal. He jiggled it lightly, then leaned in, whispering to himself, or perhaps to an imaginary accomplice on the other end of a silent call. "If I can just get in, shift that site equipment to the side project. Andrew's got the code somewhere, bypass the audit, keep the lenders off." His voice was low, urgent, words tumbling out like a plan half-formed. He mentioned the loft gear specifically, cranes and loaders I'd helped finance, talking about reclassifying them under a shell entity to post as collateral for the SUV and mortgage flags. It was calculated, a way to dodge the 48-hour deadlines without alerting anyone. He tried the door again, shoulder pressing gently, then stepped back, running a hand through his hair. Frustration etched his features as he muttered about tomorrow's calls, and how my signatures had always smoothed things before. I watched from my phone in the shadowed hallway, breath even, not intervening. This wasn't just opportunism, it was a breach, him treating my home like an extension of his schemes. The camera held steady as he lingered a moment longer, eyes scanning the desk visible through the office window, though blinds obscured the details, before retreating to the living room. He sank into the armchair, head in hands, the weight of the day's dominoes pressing down. The feed showed him pulling out his phone, dialing quietly, but no sound carried. He hung up after a minute, staring at the dormant fireplace. I waited until he shuffled back to the guest room before moving. The timestamp read 2:17 a.m. when the hallway cleared. Back in our bedroom, I downloaded the clip to a flash drive, heart pounding not from fear but clarity. Luke's whispers confirmed what the brunch and afternoon calls hinted. He saw family resources as his to maneuver, my trust as a backdoor. Morning came too soon, the sun filtering through curtains around 6. Christmas Day Part 2, but the magic had evaporated. I showed the footage to Sarah first, in the kitchen over coffee, the house still quiet. She watched on my tablet, the screen's glow harsh in the dawn light. Luke's face filled the frame, his whispers replaying, "Shift the equipment. Andrew's codes." Her expression shifted from concern to resolve, lips pressing into a thin line. She didn't gasp or tear up, instead, she reached for the flash drive I'd prepared, slipping it into her pocket without a word. "To Matthew," she said simply, her voice steady. We sat there as Ellie stirred upstairs, the kids' voices filtering down. Sarah's silence was her strength. She'd suspected Luke's ambitions for months, the late nights, the vague excuses, but seeing it captured made it undeniable. Ellie needs to know, but not yet, I said. She nodded, pouring another cup. Let the lawyer handle the facts. By 7, Luke emerged, bleary-eyed, grabbing coffee like nothing had happened. Ellie joined soon after, the family routine kicking in, breakfast burritos, the kids excited for more gifts. But Sarah's eyes met mine across the table, the flash drive a secret wait. Luke tried small talk, complimenting the food, but his phone buzzed again, the insurer, no doubt, pressing for that reevaluation. He stepped away, voice clipped. Ellie noticed, whispering to me, "He's been up half the night, Dad. Work's killing him." I squeezed her hand. "It'll pass." But inside, the twist from the camera fueled my certainty. I'd built safeguards for a reason, the office lock, the fund's dual authentication, but Luke's attempt showed how far he'd go. Recalling the audit Matthew triggered, I wondered what it would uncover: mismatched invoices, perhaps, or funds rerouted to that side project he whispered about. Mid-morning, as the kids played outside, Sarah pulled me aside. "I'm driving it to Matthew myself. Houston's not far." I agreed. The flash drive was evidence now, tying his intrusion to the broader deceptions. She left around 10, telling the family she had an errand. Luke barely registered it, fielding another call from the dealer, 48 hours ticking down. Ellie watched her go, brow furrowed, but busied herself with lunch prep. I stayed, monitoring the fallout, a text from Matthew about partner prepayments freezing in San Antonio, the downtown pilot on hold. The camera's clip would accelerate that, proof of intent to manipulate assets. Sarah called from the road, handed it off. "He's reviewing now." Her voice held quiet determination. By noon, she was back, slipping into the routine seamlessly. Luke's next call came sharper, the bank demanding docs for the mortgage flag. He paced the living room, oblivious to our knowledge. As the day wore on, the twist lingered. Luke's 2 a.m. attempt wasn't violence or theft outright, but a violation of trust, whispering schemes in my home. Sarah's handover to the lawyer was wordless, a pivot from passive worry to action. Ellie sensed the shift by evening, pulling me aside. "Something's off, Dad." I hugged her. "We'll talk soon." The camera had delivered not just evidence, but closure, the hard twist that freed us from illusion. Luke's world narrowed with each call, while ours steadied. Christmas ended not in celebration, but in the quiet strength of facing truth. The dominoes kept falling through the evening of that second Christmas day, each one exposing more of the shaky structure Luke had built on promises and my unwitting support. After Sarah returned from Houston with the flash drive delivered to Matthew, the house felt like a pressure cooker, the air thick with unspoken tensions. The grandkids were napping in the playroom, exhausted from the day's remnants of holiday cheer, stockings unpacked, a few board games abandoned mid-turn. Ellie hovered in the kitchen, chopping vegetables for an early dinner, her movements mechanical, eyes darting toward the hallway where Luke had vanished again with his phone. Sarah and I sat at the breakfast nook, nursing tea, the camera footage still fresh between us. "Matthew's already looping in the auditors," she said softly, her voice steady. I nodded, checking my own messages. Preliminary notes from the family fund review showed irregularities, transfers to unnamed vendors that matched Luke's side project whispers. It wasn't just debts, it was a pattern of redirection, siphoning resources meant for the family's future. Around 4, the first major shoe dropped, the call about Luke's removal from the downtown revitalization pilot in San Antonio. He'd been courting that project for months, a city-backed initiative to convert old warehouses into mixed-use spaces, ironic, given how it echoed his loft troubles. I'd even introduced him to the lead coordinator last spring, vouching for his firm's track record during a networking event in Austin. Now, with the revocation notices circulating and the flash drive evidence en route, the pilot's oversight committee acted swiftly. Luke's phone rang as he paced the living room, the screen lighting up with an unfamiliar area code, San Antonio. He answered on speaker by accident, the room half hearing the conversation. Mr. Harper, this is Elena from the Revitalization Board. We're regretfully removing you from the pilot program, effective immediately. Her voice was professional, laced with finality. Luke froze, the phone trembling in his hand. What? On what grounds? We've submitted all the prelims. Risk assessment, she cut in. Recent lender notifications indicate instability in your financing. The city can't proceed with partners under heightened scrutiny, especially with public funds involved. Luke's face drained, much like Sarah's had at dawn. He stammered about appeals, deadlines met, but Elena was unmoved. The decision stands. We'll reassign your slot. The call ended with a click, leaving silence that echoed. Ellie emerged from the kitchen, knife still in hand, eyes wide. Luke? What was that? He pocketed the phone, forcing a laugh that didn't reach his eyes. Mix-up on a project. Nothing to worry about. But the grandkid stirred in the next room, drawn by the raised voices, and he excused himself to the backyard, claiming fresh air. I watched from the window as he paced the patio, dialing furiously, likely his contacts on the board, but the damage was done. That pilot was his ticket to legitimacy, a showcase for investors after the brunch with Hale. Without it, his resume thinned, opportunities evaporating. The fallout accelerated from there. By 5, as Sarah started dinner, roast chicken to salvage some normalcy, texts and voicemails piled up on Luke's end. Partner prepayments froze across the board. The concrete supplier for the loft, who'd fronted materials on my endorsed credit, now demanded COD terms. No more net 30, the message read, audible when Luke checked it aloud in frustration. Then came the steel fabricator, a firm I'd connected him with years back during his startup phase. Their email pinged, prepayments on hold pending financial verification. Revocation notices received. Luke slammed his fist on the counter, not hard enough to alarm the kids, but enough to make Ellie flinch. This is insane, he muttered, scrolling through the alerts. Each freeze was a cash flow killer. His firm ran on advance payments from partners, bridging gaps until project milestones hit. Without them, suppliers balked, crews idled, and the loft's timeline, already slipping, ground to a halt. I recalled advising him on cash management last year, suggesting diversified funding, but he'd brushed it off. Confident in the next big deal. Now, those deals soured overnight. Ellie tried to mediate, pulling him into the den for a private talk. Their voices carried faintly, her concern, his defensiveness. It's the holidays, things blow over, he insisted. But she pressed, this started today, Luke. After Dad's trip. He deflected, blaming bureaucracy and bad timing. Sarah and I kept the kids occupied, reading stories by the tree, but my phone buzzed with Matthew's update, flash drive integrated. Audit flags equipment shifts, ties to side project. Lenders escalating. It was connecting dots I'd suspected, Luke using family fund allocations for unapproved ventures, like that whispered equipment maneuver. The San Antonio removal was public now, whispers spreading through industry channels, contractors' forums, developer groups where my name still carried weight. Ironically, that weight shifted in our favor. My broker called around 5:30, his voice upbeat over the line as I stepped outside. Andrew, noticed a slight uptick in the family holdings today. Words out on Harper's suspension, investors pulling back from his circle, but circling yours. Old contacts inquiring about joint ventures. I leaned against the porch rail, the Austin dusk painting the sky in purples and oranges. The uptick wasn't dramatic, just a 2% bump in our portfolio value, but it signaled restoration. Over the years, I'd diversified the holdings, real estate syndicates, blue-chip stocks, even a stake in a stable Houston development firm. Luke's ventures had nibbled at the edges, but now, with his taint removed, partners saw opportunity. The broker elaborated, that San Antonio news hit the wires informally. Your revocations positioned you as prudent, not entangled. Got a feeler from Hale's group, interested in your advisory. Hale, the brunch toast star. It was poetic. Luke's sidelining of me had boomeranged, my quiet support now visible as the safe bet. I thanked the broker, pocketing the phone with a sense of balance returning. The family fund, audited and cleaned, would rebound too, allocations redirected to the grandkids' education, Ellie's security. Inside, dinner unfolded awkwardly. Luke rejoined us at the table, face composed but eyes hollow. The chicken steamed, sides passed in silence broken only by the kids' chatter. Ellie served him extra, a peace offering, but he picked at it. Another call interrupted midway, the SUV dealer again, 48 hours looming. Collateral or repossession, the rep reiterated, voice tinny on speaker. Luke hung up abruptly, fork clattering. This is targeted, he said, more to himself. Ellie reached for his hand. We can fix it. Talk to Dad? He glanced my way, a flicker of the old reliance, but I met it evenly, saying nothing. The partner freezes compounded. By 6:30, a voicemail from his joint venture contact in Dallas, pulling out of a bid due to reputational risks. Each piece chipped away, prepayments halted meant no new materials, no progress, no revenue. The loft, half-built, became a liability, its value tanking with the insurer's re-evaluation pending. As night fell, the uptick in our holdings felt like quiet vindication. My broker followed up with specifics, a small influx from divested shares in Luke-adjacent funds, now rerouted to safer assets. It wasn't windfall, but stability, enough to cover any audit shortfalls without dipping into principal. Sarah caught my eye across the table, her nod subtle. We'd built this resilience together, starting from my first property flip in the 90s, scraping by to fund the family trust. Luke's involvement had been a detour, his charm masking the over-leverage. Now, with the San Antonio ouster circulating, likely amplified by the flash drive's implications, his network contracted. I overheard him on a post-dinner call in the hallway, "Yeah, the pilot's off. Lenders flipped overnight." His partner's response was cautious, commitments wavering. Ellie pulled me aside later, as the kids brushed teeth. "Dad, Luke's scared. The freezes, it's everything." I hugged her. "He'll adapt. We all do." She searched my face, sensing my role, but didn't accuse. Upstairs, bedtime stories masked the strain below. Luke paced the living room alone, phone dark, staring at the tree. The dominoes, removal, freezes, the subtle market shift, weren't punishment, they were consequences. My broker's uptick hinted at renewal, inquiries from old allies, perhaps even Hale, seeing my distance as wisdom. As midnight neared, the house quieted, but the falls continued in emails and alerts. Luke's world shrank, ours expanded, holdings ticking up, trust rebuilt one revocation at a time. Christmas closed with lessons etched deep, the path to accountability clear. The evening after the San Antonio fallout dragged into a tense night, the house finally quieting as exhaustion claimed everyone. Luke had retreated to the guest room early, his phone silent for the first time in hours, while Ellie tucked the grandkids in with extra hugs. Sarah and I sat in the kitchen, reviewing the day's updates from Matthew, the audit deepening, partner freezes solidifying. By 10, we'd turned in, the weight of the dominoes settling like dust. But around midnight, my phone buzzed on the nightstand, pulling me from shallow sleep. The screen showed Ellie's name, her photo from last Christmas smiling back. I answered quietly, slipping into the hallway. "Ellie? It's late." Her voice cracked on the other end, sobs breaking through. "Dad, please. It's bad. Luke's falling apart, the calls, the freezes. He's losing everything." She paused, breaths ragged. "For the kids' sake, mercy. They don't understand, but they're scared. The house, the car, it's all slipping." I could picture her in their room, curled on the bed, the grandkids asleep nearby. Ellie had always been the steady one, but this hit her core, her family fracturing under the strain. I leaned against the wall, the hallway clock still silent, camera hidden. Ellie, I hear you. But this isn't about punishment. Luke made choices, using my name, dipping into the fund without full transparency. The revocations protect all of us, including you and the kids. She sobbed harder. He says it's a storm, it'll pass. But Dad, the pilot's gone, suppliers won't budge. The kids ask why Daddy's mad. Please, talk to the lenders. For them. Her plea tugged, memories flashing, her wedding day, Luke's vows, the grandkids' births. I'd co-signed out of love for her, but love couldn't blind me to the risks. Keep the children away from the noise, I said firmly. Shield them, playdates, distractions. Let Luke meet accountability head-on. Pride can't be a tax on a family, it erodes trust, leaves nothing for the future. She whispered protests, but I pressed on. Dignity comes from timely signatures, not shouting matches or hidden schemes. He's got to face this, rebuild on his own. You're strong, Ellie, you raised those kids with heart. Lean on Sarah, on me. But this stops the bleeding now. She quieted, sobs easing to sniffles. I love you, Dad. It hurts. I love you too. Call anytime. The line went dead, leaving the house's hush heavier. Back in bed, Sarah stirred. Ellie? I nodded, recounting it. She squeezed my hand. She'll see it eventually. Morning light brought resolve. Luke's car was gone early, likely chasing leads, but the path forward was clear. Accountability wasn't cruelty, it was the foundation we'd reclaim.